I didn't grow up angry, but lately, if I look at my phone or happen to see something on television, it seems to create a rising anger within me. The current times are angry times, and that goes through pretty much all aspects of society. You see anger in people that are waiting in line. You see anger in another driver that comes across your path, quite inadvertently perhaps, but still scarily. And you find your own anger rising with certain individuals or certain situations. A couple of months ago, I was going to a meeting of a group called Mindfulness Aging. It was run by Dr. Michael Hetzner, and he has been kind of a guide and leader to me in terms of the mindfulness movement, but he also is our family physician and my physician. He delivered my second child, so we go way back and we're very, very good friends. He actually got me involved in prison outreach in terms of mindfulness, which has been a real gift. But I was going to this meeting, and there were about maybe 8 of us in the group. And I was in my car rifling through some papers, getting ready for the meeting, making sure everything was in order. And then bang, somebody hit my car. And I was in over the back seat, and I came up really suddenly and banged my head. Well, that fueled a little bit of anger. And but I looked up and it was Donna, one of our group members. I didn't know her well, and she was backing away. It wasn't a serious hit, a little scrape. Some of the paint of her car was on my car. And then she seemed a little bit confused. And then she began to go forward and she hit it again. Like, whoa. And then I was really, really ready to let loose. But then I was thinking, what's going on here and where are we going? We're going into a meeting to teach us mindfulness, to teach us to pause, to teach us to examine what our reaction and emotions are going to be. And she got out of her car. I said, well, it doesn't look like there's a lot of harm, and I'm over it. I just said that. I'm over it. And the sense of relief just drained from her. It was her husband's car. She was not familiar with it. She was really more worried about what her husband was going to say than what I was going to say. And it was kind of a difficult parking lot. So, there are always these situations. Another, basic situation is the fact that I began to look at anger from kind of a scholarly point of view, to find out a bit more about my own anger, to find out why we are in such an angry society, and what perhaps is a useful reaction. And this message focuses on 2 philosophers, Aristotle and Tokme Zongpo. Now, Tokme Zongpo has a name that in Tibetan is absolutely unpronounceable. And then some of his writings and things dealing with medieval Buddhism sort of escapes me as well. I'm no Buddhist scholar. I've been relatively new to the mindfulness meditation practice. But this guy had a profound effect on me. He really wrote things that really got to my heart and said, wow, this is really interesting. Aristotle, of course, just about everybody knows, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But Aristotle and Tokme Zongpo with slightly different emphases about anger really, I think, succinctly brings forth some useful information. And this is useful information, and the things I've chosen were chosen because of this, because they seem to focus on personal anger, and I think this is a basic human emotion. We all have this within us. And what these 2 philosophers, if you want to call them that, say, I think is quite relevant to individuals, to groups, to governments, various other entities, and hopefully you in our increasingly contentious world. In my case, this talk was first used as a part of an instructional talk in a mindfulness meditation class in which I am one of several teachers who volunteer at JMCI and FLCI, Kettle Moraine and Fox Lake, places that have volunteer programs in mindfulness as a part of the Wisconsin Prison Mindfulness Initiative. And Dr. Michael Hetzner was the guy that got me involved in this. We were friends before, but then I found out, you know, not only was I learning mindfulness from him, but he was going into the prisons. And because of that, I was instantly interested. For 10 years early in my teaching career, I taught earth science full-time at Kettle Moraine, Taycheedah, and Waupun Correctional Institutions. This was as an earth science teacher, but also director of student services and on-site liaison between the University of Wisconsin's pilot reentry education program, which ran from 1981 to 1993, and the DOC institutions and their administrations. So you can imagine if you're the liaison, you're getting pulled one way by the university, another way by the correctional industry or people, and it's not an easy place, but that is where and when I learned to care for prisoners. The two passages are clear enough and short enough for deep personal reflection about anger. And that is often anger is often problematic, and it's very, very common, a common human emotion. In a moment of anger, even Jesus of Nazareth was seen flipping tables. So it's around, and I don't think it escapes anyone, but there is sort of a movement to sort of tone that down that very often is associated with the mindfulness movement, but also it can be found in many other situations, fellowships like this, various religious institutions, various humanist institutions, and various social service institutions. I consider these two quotes for providing a brief but nice introduction to these philosophers and their broader work. And I was thinking ahead to think that maybe sometime in the future we might explore some of the other ideas that these two have published or put out. And it's too bad we only have about 20 minutes today that we can't explore more of what their work says. These are the basic resources that I used, there is some reference to this a little bit further on, and the books and that sort of thing, and perhaps how to get them. Now, Tokme Zongpo is all about something called bodhisattva, and his book, or the translation and commentary of his book was done by Ken McLeod, Reflections on a Silver River, and this is an amazing book. It's a little hard to get into at first, but basically it was a real revelation to me, and I read it cover to cover several times, and he has all kinds of ideas about how to live a good life and how to be a bodhisattva, somebody that lives a good life. What is a bodhisattva? A person who lives and breathes compassion. And various people would have different definitions, but this kind of comes from Tokme Zongpo, who really is my only basic source for this, although I've read widely in the mindfulness literature. Compassion of a bodhisattva, which is a person who sort of enables this kind of approach to the world within him or herself, it's a quality of awareness itself, the knowing that it's the core the knowing that is really essentially the core of humanity. It's deep within inside of you. Awareness is at the core of mindfulness. It really is mindfulness. It's not pity or an emotion. The word bodhi means awakening and sattva means being. And this has an awful lot to do with anger, because if we try to live the kind of life of a bodhisattva, and again, Tokme wrote 37 ways to do this, it means you're going to be more aware, and I think less likely to not pause, more likely to pause and think a bit before you erupt in anger. And according to many, a bodhisattva is a person who follows certain moments of goodness within mindfulness with another individual, perhaps at the advice of someone familiar with the concept. And this is the most important part, to become a bodhisattva can be taught, learned, and practiced. And one of the things that I emphasize in my prison work, prison outreach, is that we all can become a bodhisattva. And we can take it a little at a time, but we can look for this compassion within us and use it to diffuse tense moments, use it to establish some kind of a rapport with a fellow human being. And it's something that you get better at after you practice it and begin practicing it and continue to practice it. The moments between individuals, and I would say perhaps between nation states or groups, is that it's a moment, this bodhisattva moment is a moment of magical intuition, a moment of intimacy in which one is completely with the other person, with a compassion that knows of the person's pain or state of mind, yet is free of any pity, judgment, sentimentality, or despair. You can kind of think about, some of those initial nuclear non-proliferation talks and curbs on nuclear weapons between Gorbachev and Reagan. We don't necessarily think of those two people as being bodhisattvas, but on the other hand, they met over several times and found kind of a meeting of the minds with regard to reducing the nuclear threat. There is no sense of I or other. We are just there, completely aware and completely present. Bodhisattva qualities, and you can pick a lot of these different words out and they fit. Compassion, wisdom, selflessness, patience, altruism, enlightenment, empathy, and kindness. And you could probably think of a few more. We might simplify by describing a bodhisattva as a good person, someone we would like to be, perhaps someone we would like to be during moments of heated anger, tricky situations, or that point in time when we just become furious and lose it. I involved with my prison outreach to interact with prisoners one-on-one. And that is a very, very interesting thing. And it goes back to when I was a teacher there, because I was doing academic counseling, but obviously words would come out about this person's life within the walls and this person's life before, et cetera, et cetera. And one common thing was a lot of the prisoners said, I'm here because I just lost it. I don't know what came over me. And there are scholars that work with the brain and that sort of thing, and they talk about different parts of the brain reacting at different speeds, and I'm not going to get into all of that, but moments of heated anger are something that can be very, very dangerous, and particularly the people that have sort of a proclivity for that. A lot of the people in the prison are there because they couldn't manage their anger, and it just escaped them. There are elements of the Golden Rule, particularly in terms of the 37 lessons or poem verses that Tokme Zongpo put out. And you find some of this in Aristotle's work as well. There are elements of the Golden Rule, turn the other cheek, and other usually considered more Western ideas about how to live a good life and be a good person. We think of Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Jesus, and many other teachers that look at ways to diffuse anger, ways to interact with fellow human beings, ways to promote peace, promote compassion, and these are readings, I think, that sort of come counter to the idea of anger. So the guy with the unpronounceable name in Tibetan lived from 1295 to 1369. So for his time, he was on Earth for a long time. And nobody knows what he looks like. This is an artist's rendition that comes from the Himalayan art resources. And he was a learned Tibetan Buddhist master of the Mahayanic path. And I'm not sure exactly what that means. Carl probably knows back there and he can explain it. He was a very prolific teacher, writer, philosopher. Various times in his long life, he was a monk, a monastery abbot, a scholar, and he wrote a lot of stuff, and a hermit. And he wrote most of the 37 sort of paths to the Bodhisattva while he was a hermit. And at least he tweaked them enough to consider that as authorship during that time. He wrote commentaries on sickness and healing and other spiritual traditions, as well as aspirational prayers. And the aspirational prayer part is really a hallmark of Tokme Zongpo's teaching. He is considered to be the most famous for his mind-training slogans, often in poetic form. Sometimes he's considered a radical. I was sort of confronted by someone in the prison, not dangerously confronted, but who was a practicing Buddhist for a long time. And he thought that this person was very radical. The descriptions really belie the complex philosophical casts to his deepest thinking expressed in the simple words of his writing. And I really got into this in the book that we'll show you later, so if you want to take a look at it, you can. It's the 20th verse of Tokme Zongpo's 37 practices of the Bodhisattva that I've chosen for the first discussion. And he wrote, if you don't subdue the enemy inside, your own anger, the more enemies you subdue outside, the more that come. Muster the forces of loving kindness and compassion, and subdue your own mind. This is the practice of a bodhisattva. So let's take this line by line and think about it a little bit and see if we can match some of this up with things going on in our own lives. So if you don't subdue the enemy inside, your own anger, and everybody has it, it's inside, ready to erupt to various degrees, depending on who you are, what your background is, what your upbringing has been, and what kinds of challenges you confront. So if you don't subdue that enemy, the more enemies you subdue outside, and everybody's looking for things to make better on the outside, things to subdue on the outside, enemies to subdue on the outside, the more that come. So we could think of all kinds of historical examples. We could probably think of all kinds of personal examples. So if we let our anger erupt, very often that anger turns into something far worse, and that's particularly true of people that end up incarcerated. The anger takes over, and they have not subdued their internal anger, and they hurt other people, they hurt other things, and they end up getting involved with law enforcement, and they end up getting a prison sentence. If they get in trouble inside the prison, they end up in the hole. And that's not a fun place to be, but it's a way to keep other prisoners safe if somebody's completely out of control. Sometimes it's misused, but it's one of those things where maybe a small fight can turn into something really bad, like a month in the hole. He goes on, muster the forces of loving kindness and compassion. These are the words of Bodhisattva. We want to have loving kindness to all people, all creatures, everyone. And people that are meditators in the mindfulness movement have a sort of a I don't know what you'd call it. It's a series of words that deal with loving kindness. And it's a good thing to draw on if you feel anger erupting. And we teach this in our prison fellowship, prison outreach, that, begin to pause with breathing and then begin to yourself talk about loving kindness. Think about compassion. Think about this other person and what they may be going through. And finally, he says, and subdue your own mind. Our mind and our thoughts sometimes drive us to crazy things. And with mindfulness and awareness, we come back to that essence of who we are and what we are in this moment. And that, in and of itself, kinds of puts our thoughts to the side and allows us a pause, a calmness that allows us to consider what we might do. And of course, this is the practice of a bodhisattva. Tokme Zongpo wrote 37 of these brief poems. And they don't rhyme. They might in Tibetan, I don't know. But anyway, they have to do with turning the other cheek if somebody insults you or does damage to you or steals from you. And then it goes on to talk about ways to live a good life. Avoid problematic people, people that don't live with compassion in mind. So his 37 covers it all. I was just blown away when I first read this, and I quickly reread it. And these are words that perhaps I might not always follow, but they are aspirational. Aristotle, 384 to 322 before the Common Era. This is a marble portrait bust of a Roman copy from a Greek original, and it's in Rome, and you can go see it. And there's a little more to it, but he's fully clothed. So, Aristotle was a Greek philosopher and polymath who lived from 384 to 322 BC. He is well known in Western thought, and some would argue that he invented it. He created metaphysics, and you could find out about that if you read Robert Pirsig's Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. He talks about Aristotle a lot. His extensive writings cover wide areas of natural science and political philosophy. Remember, at this day and age, not too much was known about these, and there was not much order in the knowledge that was there. Aristotle made major contributions to human knowledge and is often considered the father of science. He developed systems for classifying plants, for classifying animals, and these systems are still to some degree in use today. You can see some of his original writings in the way the Linnaean system is developed and that sort of thing in terms of scientific nomenclature. He developed formal approaches to logic, biology, zoology, physics, and other disciplines that we don't necessarily have names for, other than in that classical era. When I was coming up at UW-Madison and I was in the Department of Geography working on my PhD, we had seminars that made the philosophy part of geography part of our knowledge. And the PhD is usually thought about as a research degree, but in geography, being sort of an ancient science and study, goes back to philosophical roots. And Dr. Robert Sack was our philosophy teacher, a good geographer, a good thinker, and well known in the classics. And that was part of what we learned, and I think it made us better geographers. Despite all of Aristotle's contributions, and also because I have a limited amount of time, I have chosen a short yet powerful 36-word passage from the Nicomachean Ethics. And Nicomachean because his son basically wrote this out, translate parts of it, gathered together his writing, and put it together in this fairly significant tome, The Ethics. And you could find this book, and I'll have references to that a little bit later. So, what did Aristotle have to say? And this is really profound. Anyone can be angry. That is easy. But to be angry with the right person, to the right degree, at the right time, for the right purpose, that is not easy. These words always take me back to Donna and her car hitting mine twice. So let's go line by line and take a look at these. Anyone can be angry, that is easy. And I think we all are aware that that can happen to us, can happen to our neighbor, family, and friends. It can happen to leaders, it can happen to nation states, and sometimes it seems easy. You get the First World War out of an assassination in Sarajevo. You know, one event put the whole world into this cataclysmic First World War. And of course, one could go on and on with historical examples. Aristotle goes on, but to be angry with the right person, to the right degree, at the right time, for the right purpose, that is not easy. So one needs to take that pause to figure out if this anger that is upwelling is directed at the right person, has been looked at for the right degree. Are you going overboard, or are you moderating it a little bit compared to how mad you are? At the right time. Maybe this is something that could be deferred, maybe an hour or a day or two, and then perhaps you've calmed down and your presumed adversary has calmed down and you're both in a better mind to discuss things and come to some meeting of the minds. And for the right purpose. Part of the song, Turn, 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 was talking about time for war and that sort of thing. And there are times when I think being angry for the right purpose is something we're all kind of considering this day and age, given the current administration and some of the really, really tragic decisions that are being made concerning climate change, concerning different things going on in the world, the Gaza situation and all of that sort of thing. This is perhaps the right purpose to be angry and to show our anger, perhaps in demonstrations, in letters to the editor, or perhaps in other ways. It's not easy to take these paths. Anyone can be angry, that is easy, but to be angry with the right person, to the right degree, at the right time, for the right purpose, that is not easy. And of all the Aristotle I've read, that seems to sum it up, and that really kind of spoke to me. Dealing with anger, Thich Nhat Hanh, who's probably familiar to many here because references are made commonly to him, he writes, aware that anger blocks communication and creates suffering, We are determined to take care of the energy of anger when it arrives, and to recognize and transform the seeds of anger that lie deep in our consciousness. When anger comes up, we are determined not to do or say anything. That's the pause. But to practice mindful breathing or mindful walking and acknowledge, embrace, and look deeply into our anger. We will learn to look with the eyes of compassion at those we think are the cause of our anger. And this comes from his 14 mindfulness trainings of the Order of Interbeing, from the Miracle of Mindfulness, a classical guide to meditation. And there's reference in a few moments to that. So to recap, if you don't subdue the enemy inside, your own anger, the more enemies you subdue outside, the more that come. Muster the forces of loving kindness and compassion and subdue your own mind. This is the practice of a bodhisattva. And from Aristotle, anyone can be angry. That is easy. But to be angry with the right person, to the right degree, at the right time, for the right purpose, that is not easy. Perhaps these two brief passages and my thoughts about them will encourage additional reflection, discussion, and ways these ideas might fit into your own daily lives. Peace. And there's some slides here.
Yeah, Stephen's going to put up a slide in a moment that will show the books that Jim referenced. And on the back of our order of service, there's a little bit of a message of the online UU bookstore. So if you are interested in checking any of these out, and if you would purchase them from our online bookstore, we get a little kickback from that. So thank you, Jim.